Welcome to the Intern Academy Gradcast. It's the culmination and continuation of decades of ministry being poured into each new generation. Listen in to intern graduates from all generations and learn what it really means to be a part of this pipeline of leadership that is changing the world one internship at a time.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Gradcast. My name is Abby Hills and I'm joined with my amazing co-hosts, Matthew Blackwood and Maddie Jensen, as always. How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Fantastic.
So good. And we're also joined by the amazing IA coach, Emily Eck. Emily, how are you doing?
Good. How are you guys?
Doing good.
Good.
Super excited to have you here. Emily,
thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining. And I was saying this before, but Emily came on a little bit more last minute, which we super much appreciate her flexibility and just her willing to jump on. And so thank you so much. We're excited
Sure.
to chat with you and to get to meet you and everything. So will you tell us a little bit about you, just who you are, your IA story, and what you do?
Yeah. So, as introduced, my name is Emily, and I am the director at Northmont Fish. We're in Englewood, Ohio, and we are a nonprofit agency. We fall under Salem Church of God's ministry umbrella, and that started about 3 years ago. Our organization has been in service to the community for about 51 years now, just shy of that. It'll be 51 years next month. And humanitarian efforts has always been the heart of it. Salem took on Fish a couple years ago because there was a lot of leadership change. The director previous had to retire, and the current volunteer team was concerned about what does that look like going forward, because no one at the time currently wanted it. And so Salem took it on and said, yeah, let's do it, and hired me as a result. And so it's been an almost amazing 3 years, or I should say almost 3 years, and it has been amazing, and just a good experience there. My intern academy story is a little different from you all because I am not an IA grad. I came into this last year. We had our first intern just this last summer, and I'm not a grad. I didn't go through the program. I didn't intern directly as someone who's a specific IA coach, and so getting to enter it from this side and grow and learn with you all too has been a lot of fun. So
Yeah, that's super awesome. Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing. I think, yeah, like I was saying earlier, it's really cool to just hear your story. It's different from a lot of IA coaches, grads, and so it's just super awesome to hear about what you're doing and how you got involved. So Maddie, you want to kick us off with our icebreaker question of the session?
Yeah, of course. Okay. So this episode is kind of talking about new generations. So with that in mind, what is some slang that you used growing up in your generation?
Oh Lord. Oh, you know, the only thing that like is coming to mind, and I don't know that I used it, it just felt like it was like commonplace, was like the Snoop Dogg stuff, like faux shizzle and like that kind of stuff. And so like nonsense talk like that, but like I don't even know. Like I
That's
just laugh
amazing.
now. Like I listen to people talk and I'm like, what does that mean? Like what? So like from my time, like I don't even know like what it was. Like, but I remember stuff like that. I don't know that I actually ever used that, but things like that, you know? Oh my
Amazing.
gosh.
That's
I didn't know
great.
Snoop Dogg was like such a trendsetter, but that
Oh,
makes
bless him.
sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
He's been around. He's still here. He's been around.
I
So
know. Even at the Olympics,
oh
like the
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Totally. Totally. Oh yeah. So
Maddie
I
and
don't know.
Matthew, what about you guys?
Oh, that's something like I have to think about too.
I'm like,
Yeah.
technically,
You know, yeah, it's a hard one, but for me, one that I would use, when I was in high school, we used the word gas a lot. Like if something was really good, we were
Oh,
like, "Yo,
yeah.
that was gas."
Yep.
But I think my favorite one, and I am only for this episode. I don't claim this anywhere else. Since I am part of Gen Z, I think my favorite one to mimic the students when they do it is what the Sigma? And
Oh
you're like,
gosh.
which means like what do you mean? It's like you're bewildered and you ask that and you have to do it with your hand up like that, like a little anime character as you move like your little Wii and everything as you say it. It I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's our generation.
Hey, fair enough.
does anyone know where that came from?
Isn't it like
um
the guy, like there's some guy on, I want to say TikTok.
oh, I thought it
I,
was a kid. I thought it was one of them Fortnite kids that like
yeah,
they were
maybe
on
it
the
was.
game and they like lost. They didn't get their dub or something, and they're like, "Ah, what the Sigma?"
I think I'm thinking about the guy that's like, "What's up, brother?" It's like that's what I'm thinking about.
That's a close second. I absolutely love that one actually.
I never like used that one, but I guess the one that I think that like day to day, thinking day to day that I probably used would probably be like, "I like your fit," like like talking about your
Okay.
outfit.
Yeah.
I feel like
Okay,
I said
yeah,
that a lot.
that
Okay.
makes sense.
So, yeah, no, that's good. Not gonna lie, I'm definitely looking at a list of Gen Z slang terms on the internet right now. But then I was like, I don't say any of these. And then I saw one and I was like, oh, wait, I do say that. I'm sorry. It's so old, probably. Whatever. I say sus a lot, like when something's
Fair.
suspicious.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I say it usually, even if it's not suspicious. I'm just like, someone says something and I'm like, okay. That's when I usually say it, actually. I'm just like, okay.
Well,
Yeah.
and like you guys said, you have to think about it because
Yeah.
you just say it. You don't think about like necessarily what it is. It's just
Yeah.
like you're used to it. It's just part of what you say. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's just so funny how these all come up. And I mean,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
it's
Oh yeah.
amazing. Oh,
Well, you know, this generation has a lot of quirks that come
Mhm.
with them. Their words that they use definitely is a very good point of it. Um, and when we're in ministry, sometimes we try to bond with these students over their trends and all this. Because I could tell you the amount of times I have tried to fit Sigma or Rizzler into like a sermon. I personally can't. I it's just impossible for me. But I think my first question is led to it by this is what are some ways to ensure a strong ministry that pours into and pushes the new generation the way that they should be? And are those tactics that you use, do you stay trendy or should we be sticking to the more traditional things that we kind of grew up with and learned from our aspects?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of things, they each have their place and their time.
Hmm.
I think authenticity goes a long way. I think
Mm,
you cannot be the hippest person on the planet and make enormous impact in people's lives.
Hmm.
Maybe hippest is one of those weird words that remind a generation. I don't know. Anyhow, um, I think it can go both ways. I think
mm,
when you have someone who is earnestly trying to learn and grow and wants to glean what they can from you, um, and you have the heart of a teacher and want to show those things and uh, put opportunity before others and that kind of stuff, I think it it can go it can go both ways. It can be fun and goofy and like on the age appropriate level, and probably should be to some extent. Like, time and place matter.
Mm,
But like, you know, it can go both ways, with if hopefully your encounter with someone who's leading you, I mean, a sign of a strong ministry would be, kind of threefold, watch me do it, I'll go, then we'll go, and then you
Yeah.
go. So no matter how that looks, um, if it is hip and trendy and like more younger, I don't know, like aesthetically pleasing, I guess is how I would say it. Um, that's one thing, but like I think authenticity can go a whole lot of a farther
mm,
distance than trying to fit a mold. I mean, you are
mm,
who you are. And that's
mm,
for the generation coming behind us as well as those who are a little further down the road. Be who you
Mm.
are. The Lord appointed you to a place and gave you a calling for a purpose and a
mm,
time. So it's meant for someone somewhere for something. But yeah, like hopefully proof of a strong ministry is there's modeling in what is good.
Mm.
So
mm.
Yeah.
Good.
And Emily, I think that's so powerful, like focusing on, like the well, can't speak today, but like the authenticity of like the ministry, but also making sure like you're going
mhm,
along with what age they are, what they like,
mhm,
because I know that some of the people in our college ministry would absolutely lose their mind if we put them in our middle school ministry. Um,
yep,
but yeah, that's so important and so good.
yep,
I feel like too, I love that you mentioned authenticity right off the bat because I feel like it's pretty well known. I feel like in Gen Z specifically that they're known to really have good discernment when it comes to if someone's being
mhm,
authentic or not.
yep,
Mm,
And I mean, I think that's a huge thing with the church in general, especially just like with this up and coming generation. Like if they are coming to youth on a Wednesday night or whatever, they
yeah,
don't know the Lord, but they have friends or a friend of a friend that like
mhm,
knows Jesus. If they assume that they're perfect people or that's kind of the way that you're
yeah,
supposed to live as a Christian, they're automatically turned off by it.
yes,
They're like,
mm,
I I do have things going on in my life. I mean, we know with the pandemic and everything, especially like mental health. I mean,
yeah,
even before that, but especially like has been a huge thing, and especially with this up and coming generation. I mean,
yeah,
being aware of that and also being aware of the fact that like they want to see us
mhm,
as we are, knowing we're people that make mistakes, but and not meaning that like, oh, we can sin and it's fine. That's a whole other discussion.
right,
Like, but
right,
knowing like, okay, the Lord still loves me and I still am pursuing a relationship with him and
mhm,
um that balance of grace and truth, which like I said,
yeah,
whole other rabbit hole we're not even gonna get into. But they really do I feel like value that more than a
mhm,
lot of things, at least from what I've observed. So I
yeah.
think that's really good. And I love that three-step, what did you call it? Like a three-step ministry.
Like, for someone to model what they're
Yeah,
doing for you,
yes.
I just said, "I go, we go, you go." So I'll
That's so
show
good.
you, we go together, now you go do it.
Hmm. I love that.
Yeah. That's not original, I've taken that, I'm sure, from somewhere, from something.
it's okay. You're gonna get the credit
Yeah,
when
you get the
I
credit.
tell my student leaders that, because that is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that's so good.
You know, if when it comes to the threefold that you were just
Mhm.
talking about, it it sort of kind of like pushes my mind towards like the mentoring, which is a very
Yeah.
big aspect, one of the three characteristic pillars
Hmm.
of intern academy.
Mhm.
Um, I'm trying to figure out how to word this.
Yeah.
Um, when when you're doing that with like the students or even, somebody that you're training up, if they're a young adult, if they're in their 30s, if they're even if they're older than you and they're still
Mhm.
learning from you, um, do you think that there are different approaches per se towards it when it comes to the differences between the generations? Um, Because I know that, like, I'm still Gen Z, like, I mean, all of the younger kids now, like, I'm still in the same generation as them, but for me personally, I there was a different way that I was taught everything and the way that it
Mhm.
worked for me, and when I look at these students now and if I, like, repeat how I was taught,
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like I just took 2 steps back with them because it's not the
Sure.
same way. So how would you like approach that? Like being able to discern the difference between each generation or even each individual person on how to step into that mentorship with them in that sense.
Yeah. Um, kind of twofold on that. So
Okay.
I think generationally, there are certain approaches that are appreciated.
Mm,
With what I do, a large percentage of my volunteer base is 65 and older, or they're post retirement coming into serve in our ministry.
mhm,
And that looks a lot different than when I was teaching a mentor or teaching an intern this summer. Um, and so it kind of takes different shapes depending on the generation, but it really takes a
mm,
lot of shape depending on who the person is. Everybody
mm,
kind of
Yeah.
absorbs things differently, and so, like, sometimes it could be a younger person, but you're gonna approach them the same way you would, like, someone who's in their 50s or 60s who, is going through some like, approaching certain things. Um, and just like everything else, you make accommodations as you go. Um, Part of like the mentorship approach is you get on the same field and you learn the strengths and the I don't want to say weaknesses, but where there's some gaps that you can grow together or go with on.
mm,
And so I think generationally, there are probably certainly some things that you have to be sensitive to. But I think learning style is a huge part of it too. Like, it needs to be engaging, certainly. You can't just like talk at a person forever. And so,
mhm,
um, yeah, like I think generation matters, but I do think too, um, how a person learns and absorbs information and gets on board with what vision you're tracking at and that kind of stuff. It looks a little different person to person.
mm.
Yeah.
That's good.
I'm curious. This is a question for anyone. In it can be in your ministry right now that you serve in, or a ministry you serve
Mm,
in. Or even just in your own experience, how have you seen the importance of pouring into new generations slash Gen Z in general, like
Mhm.
be played out? Like do you have specific examples of, like, I think for example, IYC, I mean, huge. They had I know that meeting, I'm gonna butcher what it was called specifically, but the meeting where if students were feeling called to ministry, and there were like
Mhm.
hundreds of students that went, and it
mhm,
was insane. Just like a huge, you know, um, they made room for it, and like the Lord showed up. And so I'm just curious if you guys have any experiences within your own ministry with that.
mm,
Yeah, so there's actually a student who doesn't specifically go to my church, but she goes to a church in the area who is at IYC, and she felt the call to ministry. And just talking to her and hearing her heart, there's just something so special about these kids' hearts nowadays. And
Mm,
it's so inspiring to me. Like, sometimes I'm talking to them and I'm like, man, you're gonna make me cry. Like, this is how this is supposed to work. But
Yeah.
I think that importance is just like, it's so important because we're all gonna be gone someday. Like,
yep.
Mhm.
somebody has to take on that next role,
Yep.
and, you could be gone tomorrow, like, you never know.
Mhm.
Um, And so just talking with that girl, like we had some discussions, and she taught at her youth group one night. Like after that, after filling the call and everything, and like it was so cool hearing her and just how excited she got for it. It just like brings you back, you know, like man, I remember those days like fresh to ministry. And I think it's important, like I said, for like the, you know, when we're gone, but I think it's also important, like, because they're gonna have the people they mentor one day. And so,
Mm.
you know, like I ask myself all the time, like, you know, how am I like staying, I don't know like how to
Mhm.
word this, but how am I being a good mentor? Like I just want to do
Yeah.
good for them, and I just want to try my best, and I'm not going to be perfect. I'm never
Yeah.
perfect, but it's just that's so important. It just
Oh
is
yeah.
so important.
Yeah. And Maddie, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. You know, I shared um for my ministry, a lot of our volunteer base is retirement age, give or take 5-10 years largely. Um, you know, and there's, you know, a few sprinkled younger than that here and there kind of thing. But in terms of like young adults, early 30s, that kind of stuff, I would argue that our volunteer base is super, super thin there. Um,
Mm.
and there's nothing, it is what it is. There will constantly be another cycle of folks who are retiring. Like there will always be those steps kinds of things. But like when you look at longevity and who will come behind, like who's there
Mhm.
when you look at like young and fresh um, blood, because even where I sit now, I know full good and well the generation behind me and beyond behind them, um, they have things to teach me. They have
Yeah.
things to show me and to push me. And you know, Maddie and I were having a conversation. I forget if it was this morning or last night. And I was like, can you tell how technologically with it I'm not? Like, can you tell? Um, and we were having a laugh about that. But like, even, you know, largely technology is where those differences come into play. But like, watching again, back to the authenticity thing, watching how much the younger generations crave like legitimate connection and those kinds of
Mhm.
things, and like wanting to pursue that and wanting to pull that out with people. um Sometimes I think we get in a hustle and we do a checklist. We forget to engage
Mm.
authentically. We
Mm,
show up with a happy
Mm.
face and we're like, we did our thing.
Yeah.
um but we forget to pour in legitimately.
Mm.
And I think that that's huge. So who's coming behind you that's watching? Like who's paying it, who is watching you, but who are you watching as well?
yeah.
Mm. I love.
That's good.
A question too that kind of goes along with that. And it's so sad. Like this is like our last question. We got to wrap things up, which is like the worst part of the podcast. I just love talking to
I
y'all.
know.
Um, but what is some advice that you would give to someone who is in a ministry or who is at a church who isn't necessarily feeling poured into for their
Mhm.
generation? Like what advice would you give them? And that's for anybody. So
Um, Again, kind of like the how you approach people, is it generation or is it person to person? This is kind of person to person, but you go where you can grow. You go
Mm.
Mm.
where you can be
That's
given
good.
opportunity. Um, you know, so sometimes that means leaving a situation, sometimes that means staying where you are and seeking somebody who's a little further down the road or whatever it is. Um, but you chase the growth opportunity. um, not in like an arrogance way. Like if a door closes and somebody says, no, not yet, we need to work on this, this, and this, you don't, you know, slam that door and go find the next thing because you forced your way through. But
Right.
you very much seek the next opportunity. If it's not there anymore, go through some evaluation. Why isn't it? Do
Mm.
you know somebody? Do you know a guy who knows a guy kind of thing? Um, but find your connections because they are there. Even when it feels like your immediate connections are a no-go, it's there. You just have to do your due diligence on your side and find it.
Yep.
Um, which is sort of the beauty of IA. It's helping bridge those gaps.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's what I was gonna say. I mean, I feel like this right here is the whole heart of IA, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's like you said, Maddie, I mean, they're the ones that are gonna come after us. I mean, even if you want to get technical about it, like we are Gen Z, which
Mhm.
I'm like, what? So weird. But I mean, seriously, like when you think about, okay, maybe if there's a ministry that, or a church specifically, where it's just not
Mhm.
really their focus, it's like, okay, let's think about the church years from now. I mean, who's going to be left? And like,
Yeah.
I just love it's the heart of IA. I mean, we want, I mean, like you said, this generation, they're so wise. They're amazing. Their hearts are so good. Um, and I just think the Lord is doing something really cool, especially in them and through them in the way that they're wired. And we get to be a part of that, mentoring them and helping encourage them and see and show them what it looks like to, do ministry, whether it's inside the church walls or out, but like that the Lord just loves them. And
Mhm.
there's so much, it's a whole thing. I could
Yep.
go, it's so important. That's really
It is
good.
important.
And I love
It is
that you
important.
mentioned too, like, we can learn from them because I think
Mhm.
so often it's a generational thing. Like, we can forget that we can learn from them and like
Mhm.
vice versa, but we're so used to, oh, they don't know anything. No, they actually know a lot.
They
They
know a
know a
Yes.
lot.
So
lot.
true.
Yeah, and like I think there's something so beautiful in that. And so I
Yeah.
loved that. Oh, so good.
Yeah.
Um I'm trying to think if I feel like I had one more question, but maybe not. No, I don't think I did. Oh, yes. Okay, Emily, like in your ministry specifically, like I know that, it's not necessarily you partner with the church, but it's not in the church
Yep.
walls. And so I'm
Right.
curious kind of what that looks like when it comes to you guys, um, really trying to bring on more volunteers, or just kind of what are
Mhm.
some things that, if you have anything specifically to just kind of pour into
Sure.
them, or if not, it's fine. I was just curious.
A lot of what happens organically, which is kind of what I love about watching our volunteer teams. I mentioned largely their retirement age and older, and we've been in the community for 51 years this year. So there's a long established history and understanding, um, a better understanding all the time, but a long established understanding of who we are and what we do. So people hear our name, and if they've been in the community for very long at all, they're probably at least a little familiar with us. So we pull volunteers from across church lines, across community interest lines, just community members, various things. That is how we largely pull our volunteer base in. And so we do a lot of training by show you kind of thing. Like we pull people in, we work with them half a dozen times, and then inevitably the next month after we've done the next training, because we do it monthly, um, those folks who were new last month or a couple months ago, now it's their turn to train and to grow and to show and teach and that kind of thing. So everybody's got a little bit of ownership in the game. But the cool thing that happens as a part of that is when you talk and you train with each other, across some lines that way, a lot of neat connections happen on their own. Um, it's, oh, hey, you haven't been here for a couple weeks. What's going on? And so they start, talking about their lives and this, that, and the other thing. So, like, really rich connections happen. We serve with several older folks in the community who perhaps their family is far away or their spouse is deceased now or whatever. And so, like, building that community, even amongst an older generation for like authentic belonging is huge.
Yeah.
Um, for us reaching like intern academies, like students and like drawing into that, um, Salem has a successful and healthy student ministry.
Yeah.
Um, our youth pastor is awesome, and he loves our kids well and puts experiences before them. And our pastoral staff at large is really good at conversations that say, "Hey, I see this in you. Um, let's figure out what a solid next step is for you." And so, because Fish is independent of Salem, but under that umbrella, I kind of get to be a part of that.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
so, like, I see our youth kids and I see some of those opportunities, and I get to be a part of some of that. Um, so, just like the intern we had this last summer, Kaylee's a Salem student, grown up in the church the last several years. Um, and she just happened, we had a student serve night. And so they came and they saw it, and she's like, "I think I want to see some more." And so we just
That's
started
awesome.
checking stuff out together, you know? So
Wow.
um, being intentional about those mentorship connections, but creating authentic belonging for those that are there regularly, it's
Yeah.
kind of both and.
Hmm. That's so good. I love that. Thank
So,
you for
yeah,
sharing with us tonight.
yeah.
It's been really awesome to hear about what you guys do and um just your insight on this topic. And I mean, as we all know, it's this new generation that will be
Hmm.
here after us when we're long
Yep.
gone. And so it's super important to just be authentic and pour into them
Yeah.
and let the Lord do the rest. I think that's also
Hmm.
another thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Because he
yeah,
will.
yes.
It's a no pressure thing, because no matter what's coming behind you, he will take care of it. He has
Yes.
called them just as much as he's called us, so he will forge those connections and bridges and whatever you want to call it and make it so.
Mm,
Like, we just have to be open and obedient in that step.
that's so good. Yeah. And I think another thing too, I'm gonna give a shout out to the Called Retreat,
Hmm.
which
Yep.
is next year. I believe it's June 25th. I might get that wrong. It's the end of June in OKC, which is for any students, high school students feeling called to ministry. One of the coolest things I think that IA is putting on. And so if you guys are interested in that, if you're listening to this or know someone who might, you should
Yeah.
definitely register and check out the Intern Academy website to do that. But
I
yeah,
can give
Emily,
you I can give you
yes,
the exact dates
do
actually.
it.
It's June 17th to the 20th.
Oh, I got
It's
that
gonna be
wrong.
absolutely amazing. I got to go to the called retreat, brought some students of ours. God is on the move with this new generation and seeing them step into this leadership. You gotta go. If you're
Yep.
listening and you're debating, you want to go into ministry, called is the place for you.
This is your sign. This is your sign to register. You will not
Hmm.
regret it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Emily, thank you so much for joining us. It
Yeah.
was
Thanks for
awesome to get
having
to
me.
chat with you. And for all our listeners, we hope you're encouraged by this, and we will see you next time on another episode of the Gradcast. Bye.
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 Bye.